In today's video, it's our early May seed sowing. You can see the jumper is off. Has been relegated to the substitutes bench. But as Sandy said in her comments, this is the UK and you never really quite know. So Mrs. W hasn't put it in the locker just as yet. Now, if we want a successful garden, and you want a successful garden, then we do need to sow our seeds for success. Myself and Mrs. W, we look to try and fill all of our plots all year round in order that we can feed ourselves all year round. Some of you may do the same, some of you may not. Some of you may aspire to do the same. And really, that's what all of these sow-along videos are all about. If you want to try and sustain yourself in fresh fruit and veg all year round, then these are exactly the videos for you. And you can get the sowing timelines that we use and then just transfer them to the gardening zones that you grow in. It's been a really warm day here in Norfolk today. It's been about 22 degrees Celsius and it's not good to be working in the undercover structures. Mrs. W will tell you that.
I certainly will. I did have to abandon the polytunnel for a little while this afternoon.
But it is about 7 o'clock in the evening now. And the sun is now behind me, so it's shining down the garden that way. I can see it shining lovely on the Vegigar raised bed. Now the temperature in here, well, it was at one point nearly 34 degrees. It's currently 18. Very, very pleasant. And it's something I thought of the other day, but never included it on the top tips for May that we put out. But here's a bonus one for you. You want to work in your undercover structures, come out first thing in the morning or last thing in the afternoon and into early evening, because it will be that much cooler. We need to do some sowing. And the first thing I'm going to sow is some cucumbers. Now, in the mid-April Sow With Us video, we sowed our Pachysandra cucumbers. They're doing really nice. They're sort of up here now, aren't they?
Yes, they're looking quite healthy.
Yeah, within the next week to 10 days, I should be planting them there, where the broad beans are. And I've had one or two comments from people about, what about us that don't have undercover structures and we have to grow things outside? Well, actually, yes, you can grow cucumbers outside, and there are varieties that are specially bred to do that. You'll normally find them under ridge cucumbers. I've been growing outdoor cucumbers for a number of years because up until last August this polytunnel didn't exist. We only had the greenhouse, and it's much smaller than this space. So we could only ever grow a couple of cucumber plants. So to top up on that, we would always grow a variety called Marketmore. It's a really reliable variety and extremely vigorous. Indeed, we often find that when the Pachysandra cucumbers are growing away, usually round about sort of late July, early August, they've almost finished. They don't want to be doing much more, do they?
They quite often get the powdery mildew, don't they, unfortunately, the Pachysandra do.
Whereas these go on and on and on and on.
And they do like to hide their cucumbers sometimes as well.
They do. I'm going to sow 2 seeds per station. And I've got 4 stations here. And that's so that if one doesn't germinate, the other does, I still have a plant. I'm going to go from corner to corner. Now, I'm going to sow them my way. I know Mrs. W likes to sow them on edge, but I do like to defy her sometimes, and I'm just going to push them in just as I find them. The other one in the other corner there. And we'll just label those so that we know exactly what they are. Next, I want to turn my attention to the brassica family. We sort of discussed that the brassicas that you want to harvest in winter, they can take 120, 130 plus days. But now I'm turning my attention to what I want to be eating March, April and May next year. And they take even longer. They'll take all of this year once they go into the plots, and all the way till next March and April when we want to harvest them. The first variety I'm going to sow is a variety called Aylesmere.
This is a cauliflower, isn't it?
This is a cauliflower, you're quite right, Mrs. W. And you can see here the kind of harvest that you can expect. They make lovely large cauliflowers. We actually didn't grow them for this season. We tried a variety called Velcron, and that worked really well. You've seen those harvests earlier on this year. Well, in fact, earlier on this month. But now I've got that experience now, and know when they're going to harvest. I know exactly which varieties I want to sow. As usual, we're just going to drop 2 seeds per cell, and then we shall thin to the strongest seedling. The next variety is Sendis, and this will give us harvests for January and into February. And just as with the Aylesmere, 2 seeds per cell. Next, it's time for us to sow our Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are in the ground for a very long time. They take a long time before they mature. And even longer if you follow the seed packets. They'll often tell you to sow them in March and in April. But we don't sow ours until May. And I've found that works really, really well. And we still get our harvests November, December, don't we?
We do,
Mrs. W?
yeah. Had some lovely harvests this last winter, didn't we? Fantastic.
Yeah, and it takes less pressure off your space. I can't think who it was now, but somebody left a comment to say that he needed to get his plants out because the wife was getting a bit fed up with the laundry room all full of plants. It's fine to sow your Brussels sprouts when they say, but in all honesty, I find that it works really well sowing them now in May to plant out in June. One of the reasons is that within our plan, our Brussels sprouts always follow the broad beans. The broad beans were over there last year in plot 3 where the onions currently are, and they've moved to here for this year. The sprouts were there over the winter. They'll be here for this winter. And because we sow our broad beans in October in order to overwinter them, we get an earlier harvest. And you can see already down the bottom of the plant it's starting to throw up the beans.
And there's going to be a lot of those by the looks of it.
There is, aren't there?
Yes, definitely.
So I'm quite confident that we'll actually begin the harvest of these broad beans sometime during May. They'll finish first, second week of June when we take the final harvest. Plants come out and the sprouts will go in their place. The other reason I like to follow the broad beans with the sprouts is that beans are a legume, just like the peas. and their roots can fix nitrogen from the air to provide them with nitrogen to give them a lovely leafy growth. And of course their harvests are green. Now there's some debate as to whether any of the roots hold the nitrogen after the plant is finished. I like to think that they do. And indeed, if you look back at any of our videos over the last 3 years and look at our Brussels sprouts, you'll see they are lovely, strong, dark green plants. And of course, the one thing that brassicas really do like is nitrogen. They are a leafy crop. And even if they don't leave any nitrogen behind for those brassicas to get, I'm only going to cut them at ground level anyway, and I would leave the roots in, because they will break down, rot down, and help feed our new dig soil. So for me, it's a win-win. We for many years have grown a variety of Brussels sprout called Broody. It's a lovely sprout, great tasting, it really is. It's got a certain sweetness about it. But this year we're trying a different variety, a variety called Trafalgar. From everything I've read about it, it's also a great tasting sprout, nice and sweet. But they're slightly taller plants. Broody only get to about here. The Trafalgar will get to about here, so that should offer us a bit more of a harvest. Believe you me, the Wilson family loves Brussels sprouts. The kids all say, "Got the Brussels sprouts, Dad." They don't care much about anything else I grow for the rest of the year, but when it comes to Christmas, "You got the Brussels sprouts, Dad." So we need to be able to grow quite a lot of Brussels sprouts, and we love them, don't we? Eh?
We certainly do.
Absolutely do. They're so valuable at that time of the year.
And they freeze quite well.
They do, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they do indeed. And just as with all the brassicas that we sow 2 seeds per cell, and we shall thin to the strongest seedling. The next brassica I want to sow is some Romanesco. Now we love our Romanesco
Oh,
here.
yes.
And you've been following our channel, certainly for the last year, you'll know that I sowed some Romanesco. Round about this time last year, we were expecting to have a harvest in October and November. That's when we want our Romanesco. But these didn't harvest until late December, January, did they?
No. So much so that we actually thought they were cauliflowers, didn't we? So
We did.
when they did finally mature, it was a bit of a shock.
But very welcome.
Oh yes, nice surprise.
Now, I've still got some of that variety, and I'm probably going to sow some of those again and repeat that little trick, because it was actually quite nice to have the Romanesco at that time. But in the main, we want our Romanesco round about October, November time. And if you think of the sowings that we've been making and what I've been saying, we're trying to plan for each and every individual month. There's certain times of the year when I want things, there's other times of the year I don't. I don't want Brussels sprouts in June. I want them available at least by December. We like to have the first few in November, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
But certainly late November, December and through to January, that's when I want my Brussels sprouts. I don't need the extra Romanesco then really, because I've got lots of sprouts. And we generally have Rudolph as well, that's
Yes, the purple
giving
sprout
up
and
its
broccoli,
harvest,
yes,
don't we?
Yeah.
We also have Savoy cabbages. Remember we sowed those last month. So what I'm always thinking about is when I sow these things, what months they're going to be harvesting in, so that we don't live all of November on cabbage. We will have some Romanesco, got a bit of cauliflower. We'll have carrots, so that we do get a variety into our diet. So hopefully this variety, which Mrs. W has told me is pronounced precocious.
I think it is. I could be totally wrong, but hey ho.
It definitely says on the back of the seed packet that it will harvest September and October and into November.
We shall see.
And you can sow May and June. So I shall make a sowing now for the September and early October harvest, and then next month I shall do another sowing which will then provide the Romanesco for us during the back end of October and through into November. I want to sow some fennel. I do like a fennel, and myself and Mrs. W have quite mixed results with this. Sometimes we get some nice sized bulbs that we can use. It goes great with fish, doesn't it?
Lovely.
But then other times they make a flower stalk and bolt and go to seed. Fennel are really sensitive to changes in temperature. So if it goes really, really hot, or like last year, it goes suddenly really, really cold, it's had enough. So for us, it's a bit hit and miss with fennel. But I always grow some every year because I do love the aniseed taste of the bulb that it gives. And I guess for every 5-6 plants I put out, we might see 2 to a harvest. But I do think it's worth it. And I should be sowing these successionally between now and sort of end of July. And there's a slight difference with these seeds. They're not going into module cells straight away. What I'm going to do, I've just filled a tray with some compost and I'm just going to broadcast the seed over it. Even the seeds smell aniseedy, Mrs. W.
Yeah.
I can smell those. Now there's no dedicated space in the garden for these. I just fit them in wherever there's a space. And then what we shall do is, once these have germinated, we shall then prick them out into individual cells. Once they're of a size that we can handle them, and then once they get so tall, they'll go outside into the plots. And as usual, I'm just going to give them a light covering with vermiculite. Now, with it being May, there is one very big difference from the sowings that we've done thus far. That is that these shall remain up here. No longer will Mrs. W's windowsills and tables be covered with seed trays.
Until next year.
Until next January. Quite right. Quite right. Now, I shall put these into some water and let that soak up so that they're well watered, and with temperatures like we have at the moment, they're not going to take very long to germinate, especially the brassicas. The brassicas germinate really, really quickly. Now, do let us know in the comments if you've grown any of these varieties and what your experiences are. I know that I have had 1 or 2 comments asking us if we can look at plants that you can grow outdoors, varieties like cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, chilies, and yes, we shall do that. As we go along, and I plant ours outside, I'll explain what we do and how we do it. We've missed the sowing date now because ours are already sown, but all of those snippets I shall put all together round about October time, and we'll put a complete video together of when you sow, when they go out, how you grow them, and you'll be able to view that in preparation for next season. If any of you have grown the Trafalgar variety of Brussels sprout, I'll be very interested to hear from you and your experiences with it. As I say, we have not grown this before, and I haven't done it here on camera this evening. What I am going to do is just to make a sowing of some broody, and I'll probably drop some broody plants in those rows just to hedge my bets, really. It's always
And as a
good idea to do
comparison
that.
as well, I should think, really.
Yeah, and as a comparison, quite right, Mrs. W. What I did just want to say, because one of the things that you don't know that we're sowing and what we're growing, my eldest daughter is going to be getting married next year. And it's going to be an autumn wedding, and she wants some sort of autumny sort of things. And Mrs. W has actually grown some gourds, aren't you?
I'm having a go.
Here they are.
They've germinated.
They've germinated, really nice.
I think they're called mini mix or small mix. Gourds, small mix. Never grown them before. Have no... I assume they're just like any other pumpkin or squash. So we shall see. I know you can't eat them. But she doesn't want to eat them. She wants them for decoration. So we'll see.
Now, we have over the years, we have experience of growing little pumpkins and things. And so next season, we should probably be doing some of those, because I know she wants on the tables sort of autumn decorations. And you need to be thinking about some flowers for that autumn period, don't you?
Yes,
Too.
I know.
So there's much to think about for next year, just as well as this.
It's a test run this year.
Mrs. W. Mrs. W. What do I see here?
What are you seeing? Oh my goodness. It's our first red strawberry.
On the 1st of
On
May.
the 1st of May.
And we probably
Oh,
shan't,
wow.
we probably shan't see any strawberries outside until the 1st of June.
No. Oh, that's amazing.
That has worked amazingly.
Ooh, now look, are we going to have half each? We haven't got any of the grandchildren coming round until next week, and that'll be far too ripe by then. We'll have to eat half of it each.
I think you should go in the greenhouse because it needs a bit of watering.
No.
Do have a great rest of your gardening week, and we shall see you back in the No Dig Norfolk Garden on Sunday.